What's today's date? 22nd. We'll call to order the Appeals Board of Kent County this December 22nd, 2024.
January, not December, but January.
I'm sorry, January 22nd, 2024.
Okay, we're ready.
Oh, start over again. They didn't catch the mistake.
Are we ready?
Yes.
We'll call to order the meeting of the Kent County Zoning Appeals Board this January 22nd, 2024. We have before us the appeals of the director's decision by Carl Lindstrom. And before we get started, our attorney wants to kind of set the mode for the hearing.
Okay.
Or the rules, so
So,
for an appeals of the director's
On
decision.
appeals from an administrative decision, in this case by the planning director, the Board of Appeals sits essentially as the planning director. This is so it's called a de novo hearing. De novo means new, brand new. So we will rely upon, assuming it's okay with both the department and the appellants, will rely upon, in part, what has been provided, which I'll go over shortly, and if there's any new information that either the appellant, that would be Mr. Lindstrom or Mr. Dolgus on behalf of the property owner, or Mr. Mackey on behalf of the department, which is presented to the board, then that information should be presented because the board's sitting as if it's Mr. Mackey, okay, with his powers and authorities. So we have in the record the application for shoreline revetment project of 85 feet, some of which, 40 feet of which I think was below the mean high water line, which has been approved by MDE, 45 feet of which, as I recall, when you come up, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is above the mean high water line and therefore outside the jurisdiction of MDE. And that has come before the county for approval, that portion of the shoreline revetment project. The 40 feet of riprap that was approved by MDE and or DNR, I guess it's probably MDE, was authorized because, as I understand it, it was intended to protect an existing pier and some sort of large tree that's adjacent to the pier. Otherwise, it may have been that could not have been approved and a living shoreline would have been required. So we have that application. We have the approval from the state as to the 40 feet. We have Mr. Mackey's a letter which declined to approve the additional 40 feet that's above the mean high water line, finding that it was appropriate that those 45 feet be protected, or protected, I suppose is the right word, by way of a living shoreline. We have, of course, the appeal. There's a letter recently dated January the, January the 17th, I think, 2024 from the Critical Area Commission. Is that it right there, John? Yeah. Have you seen this letter from the Critical Area Commission? Alex or Kyle? Perhaps you could, Bill, yeah.
If it was sent out, then I have it, yes.
And what we have in the application, along with the application, is a series of photographs that shows a steep slope. Well, I shouldn't assume it's a steep slope. It looked like one. Perhaps we'll get more information about that. Yeah, there we go. That the revetment project is intended to protect, as I understand it. I think that's what's in the record that the board will consider. And if you gentlemen want to add anything to what's already in the record, please come forward and.
Do they need to be sworn in.
Actually, have not seen this letter.
We have not seen this letter, so
So if you guys would continue standing and raise your right hand. Do you declare that the testimony you're about to give in this case to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, please be seated. And state your names, please, and who you're representing.
Alex Dolgus, I'm a consultant representing the Lindstrom Excavating Company
And
and the property owner.
I am Kyle Lindstrom, representing Greg Watson, the property owner, for this proposed project.
If you would, if
You
you
can
just,
sit down.
can you give us a second to look at this letter?
Yeah, sure.
We've never
Sure.
we've never seen this letter. I'd like, if possible, for it to go in the record that we never received this letter.
Okay. But you've had an opportunity to read it?
Yeah.
Okay. You can tell us something different when you get a chance. So what would you like us to know that is not already in the record? And if you'd identify yourself before you speak, because it may be that we have to have a transcript of this if there's an appeal to the circuit court. So we'd have to know who's talking in the event that there's a transcript necessary.
Okay, Kyle Lindstrom. I have a packet for every panel member to see. Printed out 5.
Mr. Lindstrom, did I hear you say you did receive the Critical Area Commission report?
So I do not recall receiving it. I can't speak to if I missed it in my email or not. I don't remember reading it. I'll leave it at that.
I think you're getting some.
Yeah, I see that. No, I could very well have received it.
I know I didn't receive it.
Okay, so what would you like us to know? If you identify yourself, if it's.
Okay. I'm Alex Dolgus, environmental consultant, working with the Lindstrom Company and the property owner. This site, a little bit of history. There's a typical process. You have to get straight with MDE to kind of start the thing if possible, which I did, and got a representative from MDE to come out. She advised that due to that large specimen tree that sits on the property, it's about 4 or 5 foot diameter, red oak. It sits right on the edge of the shoreline, that it would be justifiable to issue that first 40 feet at least to protect that tree. That was the issue at the time. We have, to go in the record, a few photographs that you might not have of the bank. Are they in their packet?
Yes, they're all in their packet.
Okay, so you'll see these in the packet.
Could you help us with, I'm looking at this photograph, which just happens to be the top one. Is that the tree that we're talking about?
Yes, that is the centennial
On the
tree.
right-hand side.
Right.
So the 40 feet of riprap that ends approximately,
Approximately, very approximately.
In the plan,
let me make the record clear. The 40 feet approved by MDE would end approximately a third in from the right side of the photograph, approximately.
Yes, I don't want to, yeah.
in the packet is a reduced copy of this plan, which I have in front of me,
Yeah, we have that.
which shows the 40 feet and the additional that we were requesting.
Okay.
With my initial site visit with MDE, I discussed her position, her name Mary Phipps Dickerson's position was they could go along with the 40 feet because of the tree. I said, well, what if we just step up into the yard and get away from any water or mean high water and just put it in the yard, and then we would just be at most a buffer impact. Mary told me that if you get above the mean high water, MDE does not have jurisdiction of it. So you'll have to deal with the county or critical area, whoever regulates that. So MDE was kind of added a picture at that point. So I applied at that point for the 45 feet to be sure we had that at least. And we requested from the county, well, let me back up a little bit. We had a meeting on site, which the state critical area was there, and a representative from Fish and Wildlife, I think it was there. County people were there, talked about it, discussed it. And I had some questions of who would be authorizing or not, or denying authorization for anything we were requesting. I was told on the site by the critical area guy that was in charge that I said, so you would deny a permit for work up in the buffer? The answer was no, we won't be denying it, the county will be denying it or issuing it. It's up to the county, not up to us at this point. I said, okay. So went ahead and changed the drawing to show everything up in the yard, out of the water, which,
By out of the water, you mean above mean high water?
pardon?
Above mean high water?
Yeah, above mean high water,
Right.
which is out of the water completely.
Most of the time.
So we're talking primarily a buffer impact in the 100-foot buffer to protect the man's shoreline for 45 feet. Now, we're not talking about 500 or 700 feet. We're talking about 45 feet. About as long as that room, perhaps. That's it. So there's several reasons, which I'll get into, that we have a problem with the whole situation the way it is. But MDE went ahead and authorized the 40 feet as I proposed. We have that, you have a copy of that permit in your packet. I've changed the plan a little bit, which you have it in your packet, to show a different symbol for the stone that was approved versus the stone that we were asking for, just for clarification purposes, if nothing else. And you'll see it in your packet. We've looked at several things. Since we met on site with everybody, and MDE was not there, but MDE had told me that they're out of the picture if we're up in the yard. So from then, we moved to requesting to the county to put that 45 feet up in the yard to protect the man's shoreline. Grade the bank accordingly, put some stone up there to protect the shoreline from eroding. We applied to the county for that. Now, subsequent to applying, I went in and talked to Bill Mackey about what we could do and couldn't do, and made a technical argument about sun angle on this property. There's no marsh to speak of in front of this eroding bank, which you've got the picture in front of you. There's marsh downstream and there's marsh upstream, not right next to it, but in sites up above and below. But that site has no grass to speak of, which I kind of tried to argue that with the critical area folks when they're out there, that there's a reason that there's no marsh there. And however it was, that's what was argued. Anyway, since that time, I've started looking closely, and based on my experience, I've worked for the Army Corps of Engineers within the permit processing game for 30 years prior to retiring. And since I retired, I've been doing some consulting work. So I've got probably 50 years experience with this stuff. Anyway, this sun angle was something that I was concerned about when I went out and looked at the property during the growing season. And the bottom line, and I'll demonstrate in a minute, the reason that there's no grass growing in front of that bank is there's no sun hits it. Maybe late in the afternoon, 4 o'clock or so, but it can't, and you can follow me on what you have in your packet, but this big plan, here's the house, which you can see in some of the pictures. Here's the shoreline. North arrow, which means east, west, this way. Sun comes up kind of behind the house. It's all trees in here. It goes to the south, like it typically does. There's trees here. This big tree, the canopy of this is just put on there by the engineer that drew this. It's bigger than what's shown. But anyway, this big tree, which we're trying to save, shades from a little bit after sunrise all day, and there's trees over here too, until way out in here, any sun can get to that property. Now, if you notice on your plan, which this is a big copy of it, there's a north arrow. Try to figure out where the south is. I'd like for you to look at this aerial photograph I believe it's in the packet.
Oh, no, that one's not. That's right here.
If it isn't, okay.
Here's a couple.
Give them a couple. That's another one here.
Oh, yes, sorry. I thought I had more.
Anyway, if you're looking at the center, you see the pier that's got kind of a little floating dock or whatever out front of it. That round circle right there by the end of the pier is the canopy of that big tree. The sun comes up, if you're looking at this picture, the sun comes up behind the house. So this small 40 feet that we're talking about is right next to the canopy for that tree. Sun comes up over here behind the house, goes to the south. You can see these are trees that are up much higher than the house on the right, if you're looking at this picture. All the way down next to that next driveway, and it continues out on that point. So there's very little chance for any sun, only a couple minutes after it might come up, to reach this point. And the canopy of the big tree that we're trying to save is blocking it almost all day. It's amazing when you stand there and look, there's no sun hitting that bank. So in order to create a vegetative shoreline there, one of the first things you gotta have is the amount of sunlight in order for it to be successful, which you don't have on this property. It's very limited on sunlight. And in order to create 40 feet of vegetative shoreline,
45 feet.
the way it's designed, you have to backfill the shallow water out maybe 40 or 50 feet, gradual slope of 10-to-1 up to the bank, if you will, and then plant it with plants. Now, that in itself is a little tricky, primarily because there's other factors that involve here. Once you put in the first 40 feet that's authorized, if you look in your plans, up in the left-hand corner, that plan shows a 5,000-foot fetch coming across Turner Creek. That strikes right there, right on the property. So if a person was to put that stone in the way the state has authorized it, backfill with loose fill out in front of this 40 feet, the energy from this 5,000 feet I'm talking about is going to come right in here, hit this stone, reflect off it. It's going to be a constant turbulence problem right there, and the fill material that you put in to try to get a marsh established, it's not going to stay there. The vegetation that you would have to plant is an elevation-dependent vegetation. There's only a small window of elevation that grass will grow on. So you've got to have that just right. Typically, they slope it gradual. They want you to slope it gradual. So you'd have a narrow band of the one grass and then a higher species above that. But the elevation is a restricting factor there. And if you put loose fill in there, there's no way of stabilizing it if you just put plants in. The typical vegetative shoreline is supposed to be designed to where you put enough vegetation in there with plants. The roots establish in the spring when you put it in there, they establish enough to grab the soil to hold it there. With these additional factors, that material is not going to stay stable just with that grass. And if that sediment gets moving around, it'll smother the grasses that are there. So it's just, based on my experience, it's just not a good spot to try to vegetatively stabilize this bank, this shoreline. Now, there's people that have commented on this with not much experience on it to the county, in all good faith for them. But when I ask questions, they aren't even aware of how these things are made, or how you build a marsh in front of a bank like that. I've asked several of them, have you ever been out and actually saw what goes on when you have to try to do that? All of them say no. So I've seen, I don't know how many. I was responsible for the enforcement and compliance of the Corps of Engineers permit program for the Eastern Shore. the whole eastern shore. And I've seen all kinds of work, this stuff, but I've seen many of these type of things that have not been very successful. They put in fill, they plant it, and they put in fill, and they plant it again, and then you wind up with a sand beach because it doesn't work. And in this case, you don't have the sun angle, so that's an important factor. And if you got not had enough daylight hitting this marsh, it's just not going to survive. And this site with that big tree, and the way the sun angle is when the sun comes up, because I've been down there in the morning and watch where the sun comes up, kind of right behind the house. And this photograph, if you look at that one, and all this is big trees here. And that's where the sun comes up and goes to the south around here. Now, I had kind of argued a bit when I came in to talk to Bill Mackey about this, about the sun angle, and was expecting to see a comment at least back about whether the county agreed or disagreed in the sun angle argument, which I've never received anything. So I don't know technically what the county's decision was based upon, other than MDE originally said, we can't give you a waiver for that 40 feet. It seems like it's just all revolving around the fact that they said we can't give you a waiver there, but we're out of the picture because you're up in the yard, and that's been carried on all along. And nobody's arguing back, well, you're wrong, there's plenty of sun and all that. We've not seen any of that, including the guys from critical area, the state people up around here. They essentially have limited experience with this stuff. Most of them only been there for a year and a half or 2 years, and they haven't seen any of this stuff before. And these things are expensive, so you're going to cause a property owner to spend a fortune on something that won't work. Why would you take the chance of trying something that the experts are telling you, like myself, it won't work? I mean, it's not worth the risk, I don't think.
Mr. Ogers, you mentioned that there are properties, I think you said to the, perhaps the north and the south on Churn Creek that have, as you called it, marshes?
Yeah. Upstream and downstream.
Okay, what's the difference, what's the distinction between those properties and this one? Why are they successful and this one wouldn't be?
With what I just explained, there's no sun hitting this bank.
And there's sun hitting everything else around it?
The sun is hitting these spots where the marsh is growing. And you've got the 5,000-foot fetch coming right up to Pond Creek, which hits right there. It doesn't hit where
They're
it
not
fits.
subject to the fetch?
Pardon?
The other properties are not subject to the same fetch?
Yeah, but it's not the same angle. This just happens to be, you see the arrow in the corner of that plan. Northwest, it hits right on. And
I don't know that we have the
It
the location, the vicinity map on.
should be the
Oh, no,
the
this
cover
one. Oh,
sheet.
yeah,
Okay,
you're looking at it.
okay, sorry.
And you all know from living here, in the wintertime, when it blows northwest, that's when things get hit. And this just happens to be, it's just not a good site, that's the problem. But other than that, I mean, I pretty well explained what I think technically is the problem there. And whether you all think that that's a good idea to enhance, get involved with something like that, that we know it's not gonna work. You don't have the physical characteristics to make it work. And it'll just, well, when the stone goes in around the tree, that northwest wind's gonna hit that stone and bounce off it and cause turbulence right in front of where you're trying to establish a marsh. It's not gonna work. And we're only talking 45 feet. We're not talking long pieces of shoreline that stick out, sometimes you get a stretch of shoreline 1,000 foot long or whatever that's right out in the open, in the sun. That this has got too many strikes against it right out of the chute. And I don't know of anybody with any experience that kind of has commented on the sun angle, except me. And
Well, you've shown us a couple of photographs of these are obviously taken during the summer or the fall because the trees are still, have foliage.
right.
Yes, those are afternoon photos.
Pardon me?
Those are afternoon photos of the property in the summer,
Right.
roughly middle of June.
Plenty of sun. Are
Yes,
those volunteer grasses?
so yes, but as he mentioned, they're not with the grasses we're talking about.
That's not the same
No, I
species.
just asked if they're volunteers. I didn't ask about the species. but-
It obviously is.
Okay.
They're switchgrass. And the only reason I think there's a little bit of switchgrass growing here and there, the owner, and it might be the previous owner, might have had a duck line there. And everybody around here usually brushes duck lines with switchgrass. And that could have been the source of some seed in the past, because there's no switchgrass growing upstream or downstream. It's just there. Little chunks of it, that's all that's there.
What would the riprap, to install it properly, what are you gonna have to do to that bank? You mentioned you're gonna have to grade the bank.
Yes, it will have to be sloped back towards his yard. On
Well,
roughly
what's the slope?
a 3-to-1 slope.
And what's it right now?
It's basically sheer.
Yeah. So you're gonna have to go back 35, 30 feet?
Oh, no,
30
no,
feet?
no. You're looking at roughly 3-to-1. You're going back, because you're only going back so far to get it above the water level to make it stable. In other words, you're trying to protect it from high tides. You're talking +5. What you see the ground at right there, I believe, is roughly a +2.5. So you only have to make up so much slope to get high enough with the rock to get it out of danger, if I'm making sense. Only looking about going 2.5 feet higher.
The bank right there strikes me, I can just see over it by standing down at the bottom, so it's about 5 foot high.
How how far back do you have to go?
So, I mean, you're looking at roughly, and I say roughly 15 feet back into his yard.
Is that gonna affect that big tree there? It looks to me to be a lot closer.
So, just to clarify, the big tree where MDE approved the rock is actually getting moved out. So that 40 feet that was approved, the rock was moved out. So the bank there isn't getting sloped back. It's actually, we're going out in the water for that 40 feet, so we don't disturb that tree. And that's what MDE has already approved. The additional 45 feet is what needs to get sloped back, because we wanted to get that, that's what MDE is not letting us do out in the water. So we said, okay, we'll go behind the mean high tide line.
No trees within that 15-foot area that you,
No, none.
This one?
That's not with it.
That's-
Yeah, the photo may
That
be,
one there?
it may be deceiving, but no,
It's further back.
that's further back.
Okay.
That's, yeah, I think the overhead plan
You can-
shows
You
it,
can
but
see that if you look at this aerial,
Now, this is a better perspective, actually. It doesn't look quite as dramatic in this one.
Yes, so on this photo,
There's quite a bit of vegetation in this one.
approximately where would the approved riprap be ending, right? Because I think I
see that bush there, that different,
Yeah,
look,
right there.
it's a small tree, as a matter
Yeah,
of fact.
that small tree.
That's about the end of the state
And-
authorization.
And I'm guessing these chairs are what, or the fire pit that's on this other plant?
yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the fire pit area.
So from where your approved riprap is ending to, where's the property line over here?
Right about where your finger is. Can you see that little stop sticking out of the bank?
Yeah,
There's a little pipe sticking out.
little pipe sticking out, I don't think I,
This, see it in this thing here? Or is that a root?
I think that's.
Take straight out of the bank.
Oh, yeah, I see something right here.
Yeah, that's
Right
the
here.
end of it. That's the end of it.
I was gonna say, that's not the property line, though.
No.
That's not the property line?
No, the property line is, I can't speak to exactly how close it is, but I believe it's over 80 feet away from the, where we're proposing.
Where the 45 feet would end?
Yeah, the 45 feet end roughly where the shoreline is vegetated. There's a bunch of tree growth and everything else you can see in that one photo.
Yeah, the bank doesn't seem to be affected from that point further up as you're looking at the picture. However, all the erosion is right on that bluff, that bank.
No trees is where it used to be.
What
Is
we're asking,
switchgrass,
it's-
does switchgrass tolerate salt water? That's what this is?
no, it might get sometime, but it won't grow in salt water.
Doing pretty well in this picture.
Well, it's not in the water though, it's above it. See, the ground, as you're standing there, slopes up
Yeah.
from right about where the water is,
Yeah.
which is closer to mean high. It slopes right on up.
That's what I was saying. If you can picture at the foot of that bank is roughly at elevation 2.5. Mean high is over a foot below that. So that's where the switchgrass is living, which is a range above, your average mean high. Doesn't mean it doesn't get wet and it can stand, surge tides. It just can't be inundated every day, which it's not.
So is this a picture taken at mean high tide?
I can't comment on that. And
No, not purposely, no.
no, I honestly don't know what,
Where does mean high tide come?
uh,
Does it
it
come all the way up
comes
to the,
right up to the beginning of the grass. I would say is a typical mean high tide.
right at the base of the sheer drop off?
No, where you see the grass, so,
Well,
I
what you're telling
apologize.
us, this is approximately mean high.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's very close because see that one bush, that real green, that's a freshwater tree, the talcum tree. Which
Yeah.
would not be growing any
Tree
salt.
right here.
That's a tree.
So,
That's a tree.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on here as a tree.
so I also see grass growing in all that area too.
What about it?
There's grass, I mean, you're talking about shade and sun angle and all that, but there's grass growing in the area, in this area and all underneath that shaded area there. And it appears to be on this one as well, although it's a little hard to tell in the winter.
But it's essentially a upland grass, which, you can buy seeds for shade in the yard. I mean, we're talking apples and oranges, really. We're not talking salt marsh grass, we're talking
Right.
switchgrass, which
I
grows,
understand
switchgrass will grow in your backyard.
Can you help us understand then, if that is mean high, and I understand you get flood tides sometimes, and
Right.
I'm sure if there's a fetch, and it's a northwest fetch, which I do see it is, I'm sure water can pile up here in the winter. But that doesn't explain why this is eroding so badly.
Well,
Is it eroding badly because of stormwater?
From the northwest fetch is hitting that bank.
Oh, yeah, but how often does it do that? I mean, I'm wondering why it's eroding so badly.
It's virtually unprotected, and then when it gets hit in a storm, I mean, typically, most of your erosion happens in storms, and that's what's going on there.
That's big chunks in a storm.
Yeah, it'll take out, and it's not a big chunk. One storm may take out 6 inches. Another storm may take out another 6 inches. But you get, over a 30-year period is where you get serious erosion.
That's why we suggested to just put something up in the yard to protect the bank enough when the northwest comes blowing in there, to just stop it a little bit. Otherwise, the bank's gonna keep eroding.
Yeah.
So you wanna get rid of that sheer drop off.
Right.
You wanna clear all that, you're gonna have to go back 15 feet to do that without extending the shoreline out into the water.
For the 45-foot section that's not approved, correct? Yes.
That's correct.
So And then you're just gonna lay, stone revetment down on top of that,
More or less, yeah. It'll have fabric and stone.
fabric, and then.
Yes.
Well, how close would you say the riprap is going to come to, let's assume this is mean high water.
Okay.
The stone is going to come within 2 inches or 2 feet of that?
You're talking about,
Of mean
No,
high.
You know,
It'll be parallel with the 40 feet that you have approved, or
Won't be
45 feet?
parallel.
No, it won't be parallel.
you have to go like this.
It may be best shown on this drawing because you can actually see, if you want to pass it around, how it, excuse me, how it steps back. Because you can see the one tree that looks like a bush, and you can see how far behind it we are on this drawing.
yeah,
That, because it's actually located on that map.
if you need to, look at the bigger plan. This is that freshwater bush that I'm talking about.
I see, okay, so you're, what's the scale like this?
20.
Yeah, it's a
This
20
is-
square.
This has been enlarged.
That's maybe 7 or 8 feet.
Yeah.
MDE approved.
And that's the.
I would have guessed it to be about
This is where he wants to stand up back here.
Okay, so the tree stays until it dies.
Yeah,
Which that's one of the inevitable things that's going to happen anyway.
This
small
tree
tree.
would not be affected by the stone. The stone would end behind a tree.
the stone will be totally up in the guy's mowed yard. It won't be anywhere down low to where the water can get to it, or you're gonna affect anything that might be growing there now. We're talking about, it was primarily a suggestion to just move it up in the yard, just so the guy can get some protection there, because obviously between the northwest wind and the sun not allowing that to stabilize a good marsh growth there, it just would keep washing.
So, to be clear, your opinion is that MDE doesn't have the authority to rule on this?
Not once it's above mean high water, no.
Okay.
No, they don't.
So, and you don't believe that Critical Area Commission has any authority to rule on this either?
No, the Critical Area Commission, which the county's implementing the program, regulates the 100-foot buffer above mean high water. So the bank that we're talking about grading back, putting some stone on, is within 100 feet of the mean high water. So it's in a 100-foot buffer.
Which the county does regulate the county is obliged to regulate activity in the 100-foot buffer because the state told the county, all counties, that we have to. The Critical Area Commission has rules which the county has to apply. The Critical Area Commission, which is not here tonight, though they have submitted a letter, the manner in which the Critical Area Commission enforces its rules and regulations is if it disagrees with what a county does, it appeals the county's decisions.
So the Critical Area Commission says we concur with planning director's determination that proposed revetment mean high water cannot be approved. So
They're recommending essentially that you go along with what Mackey has.
they're recommending it, or they're saying it?
Well, they're saying it, but it's only a recommend, you don't have to follow it if you don't want to. If you believe that they've got the law wrong,
But do they have the ability to?
they could appeal it.
No, does the Critical Area Commission have the ability to, even though if we approved it, they have the ability?
They can't invalidate the permit except by going to court
Okay,
and asking the
Okay.
court to invalidate it.
so, if we could ask, I don't know whether we do this right now or not, but it would be important to ask Mr. Mackey.
I think we've got, is there anything else you want to add? I think we got the picture.
Yeah. No, I think everyone has the picture for the
Right.
most part now.
Okay,
Pictures as it
Yeah.
okay. So do we need to swear in Mr. Mackey?
Well, I guess, let's. good for the goose is good for the gander.
You declare testimony you're about to give, in this case, be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Please be seated, or please,
Maybe you could.
maybe grab a microphone and. Let's get over.
There you go.
So, Mr. Mackey, what was the basis for your decision?
So I think as council has explained, the Critical Area Commission requires that the county adopt a program. That program has to meet the standards of the Critical Area Commission. In many cases, we will turn to the Critical Area Commission to assist with advice and interpretation, because essentially the law is intended to enforce their provisions in COMAR and state law. So in this case, when there's a situation that's unclear, we often turn to the Critical Area Commission and ask for their advice, which they advise that this is not approvable under our program, which I think we concur with. And so that my decision is basically based on that idea of, it's our law, we enforce it, but we have subject matter experts in the Critical Area Commission that we can go to and sort of say, in the big picture, does this work or not work? So that's the basis of my decision.
Well, and let's examine the relevant provisions of the land use ordinance. I'm not anticipating or encouraging any particular decision by the board, but the relevant provisions of the ordinance, which incorporate the state critical area requirements. We gotta look at section 5.7A1, which is a general directive to minimize adverse impacts to non-tidal or tidal wetlands, Chesapeake Bay, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, as identified by the Department of Planning and Zoning. Obviously, Churn Creek is a tidal wetland. 5.7B3AI, development activities, I'm not reading all the words, development activities including structures, and the stone revetment is a structure as defined in the ordinance, so it's a structure. Structures are not just, houses and buildings and so on. Structure is defined as anything constructed or erected which requires a more or less permanent location on the ground. Obviously, a stone revetment is permanent. So, development activities, including structures and any other impervious surface, shall not be permitted within the minimum 100-foot buffer. But this does not apply to water-dependent facilities. The revetment that's being discussed is not a water-dependent facility. The pier is, but the stone is not.
I would question that.
I know you would, but it's not, in my opinion, a water-dependent facility. But I'm happy to hear contrary arguments. So they're not permitted within the minimum 100-foot buffer, and in fact, the buffer in this case probably needs to be expanded because of the steep slopes, when you think about it.
Where's the steep slope?
I assume they're more than 15 degrees. It's more than 15 degrees.
Real gradual.
But it'd be whether or not it's at 15% when it hits the 100 foot.
Okay. So maybe the buffer doesn't need to be expanded. Okay. So B1 of 5.7B3B1, natural vegetation in the buffer shall be preserved unless, and there's a whole series. D is the disturbance provides access to water-dependent facilities or shore erosion protection structures. So natural vegetation shall be preserved unless the disturbance provides access to water-dependent facilities or shore erosion protection structures. And then finally, subparagraph number 10 Development on slopes greater than 15%, as measured before development, and grading, by the way, is development, shall be prohibited unless the project is the only effective way, and this is what Mr. Dolgus is arguing, the only effective way to maintain or improve the stability of the land. I'll read that again. Development on slopes greater than 15%, which is proposed here. Obviously, they've got a sheer wall, it's greater than 15%, and they want to knock it down to a more gradual slope and go into the property about 15 feet approximately. So, development on a slope greater than 15% measured before development, which takes the land as it exists right now, shall be prohibited unless the project is the only effective way to maintain or improve the stability of the land. That seems to me to be the operative language of the ordinance. Whether you're persuaded that the disturbance to the slope to facilitate the placement of the stone is the only effective way to maintain or improve the stability of the land.
So Mr. Dolgus is believing that the revetment is an effective way.
The only effective way, because he claims that the living shoreline will not survive,
Okay.
for the reasons he's explained.
Mr. Mackey is,
I don't know, he hasn't,
So, I mean, the analysis that council just provided is an analysis that, the staff team would have done first. Critical Area Commission would have been a second opinion on that.
Right.
And just as I was sitting here, I just did some looking on my phone, and there would apparently be shade-tolerant marsh species native to Maryland. So I don't think sun-only species, that's the only kind of species that exists. That might be the more convenient kind, I'm not sure, I'm not a landscape architect, but clearly it would appear that there are some species that are shade-tolerant that can survive in a marsh.
so Mr. Mackey's basis is the MDE Critical Area Commission in the state of Maryland's preference to natural solutions.
We also, in our comprehensive plan, have a goal and a preference. It says
And-
living shorelines are the preferred methodology for shoreline stabilization in Kent County.
Okay.
Yeah.
and there has been a campaign against riprap for the last 25 years. Whether it's the right campaign or the wrong campaign, there's no question that stone revetment is not favored
Why is that?
because, I don't know.
First, it was bulkheads.
Bulkheads, bulkheads are
Yeah.
history.
There was a-
Bulkheads are history.
They just want to get rid of bulkheads. And they argued at the time, because I was working in it fully then, the argument was the stone riprap is much better, it breaks up the energy, it provides habitat for the critters in between the stones in the shallow water.
That's right.
Now,
That's right.
now the trend is going the other way, that, oh, stone is bad,
They're not bringing back bulkheads.
and everything needs to be grass. Well, there's places where you can't put grass, and the grass won't work. Marsh grass won't work. And sunlight is the big controlling factor. I'm not aware of any species of marsh grass that will grow without sunlight. That just doesn't happen. If you think about a marsh, a big, typically flat area out in the edge of the bay or wherever, it's always out in the sun. You walk along the shoreline, wherever there's shade, you've got no grass growing.
So is marsh grass the only thing that you put on a natural barrier?
Well, the area that they want to put the marsh grass is at or below the mean high water line, out in the water, which there's only a few species that tolerate being out there like that. So this theory of a species of grass that's shade tolerant, if you walk along the shoreline, you can see what's shade tolerant and what's not, because it won't be there if there's not sun there.
Well, something's there because somebody took the pictures and there's,
Yes, and as he said, though, that's like the shade-tolerant plant. I mean, I lived in the woods and I got grass to grow. It wasn't the type of grass that grows in somebody else's yard that's got full sunlight all day. It's the same deal with marsh grasses. I mean, that's fair to say in every way.
I don't know whether what is growing there now is producing a mass of roots sufficient to hold the sand/soil. We don't know. It looks like it's doing pretty well. There's a tree growing there too.
But if we
Must be fairly stable if you got a tree.
If we go
growing
by
there.
design and fill
I'm being devil's advocate.
a foot or more out 40 or 50 feet, and then plant grass on it, is that grass going to survive? I say grass, marsh grass. Is that going to survive? No, because of the sunlight and the energy smacking it from the northwest. So if you didn't have the shade, just the northwest wind would be quite a deterrent for a shoreline stabilization.
Mr. Mackey.
Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify my comment. I'm just saying that there are shade-tolerant species, not necessarily grasses, but things that can be planted, apparently. So I'm not making an argument over grasses, not a landscape architect, but it would appear that there are solutions that work in a variety of settings based on the species used.
Who would make those determinations?
Generally, the designer. We respond to the design submitted. So generally, when a living shoreline is required, then a designer who is familiar with plantings and species puts together a package. We review it to make sure it's sort of generally compliant with the code, and we rely on the expertise of landscape architects and other folks familiar with those plants to provide the correct plant in the correct place.
So where on this picture would the living shoreline start?
Well, what do we say, approximately 5 feet to the side of that little tree that's growing on the beach.
To the right of it.
To the, yes.
To the right. And how far out in the water would it
Not going
go?
to be in the water.
The living shoreline?
Yeah,
Oh, the living
A
shoreline.
living shoreline, approximately, it's different everywhere, but I'm going to say 30 to 40 feet,
30, 40 feet out this way.
yes. Because even the grass on shore likely would be covered, and it would be replanted with actual marsh grass.
So they're going to move,
But if it's submerged, then that's submerged
SAVs.
SAVs.
Yeah, but if it's filled, it won't be submerged. See, that's the,
I don't,
yeah, that's,
I-
in order to do that, what they want to do, with a 10-to-1 slope, is backfill the shallow water, which there's a lot of controversy over productive shallow water, why fill it, but anyway,
So
you'd have to fill it to an elevation that was suitable for that grass. And that grass grows within a tolerance of about that much.
so you want to backfill the shallow water which comes up in this?
I mean, we don't know, but if you were to build a living shoreline, that is what you would be doing, because you need it to be at a 10 to 1.
he's saying backfill 30 or 40 feet out into the
Out
water.
in the water.
Yeah, so that's how living.
You need a wetland fill permit for that.
Well, it's part of the living shorelines, and I think Mr. Mackey can speak to it, are typically pretty easy if you go with a standard.
Oh, okay.
That's what the
Shoreline
state,
permit comes with a fill permit, basically.
that's what the state wants. The state wants living shorelines. It's usually not a fight to get a living shoreline permit.
Okay.
I've watched so many living shorelines fail that I don't know what the success rate is, but I know it's not very high in the state.
Well, I could see if you have to, I didn't understand that you were going to create fast land that doesn't exist now.
Yeah.
I could see that might fetch,
So,
not last very long.
I have a question. Is there a compromise here? Half living shoreline and half revetment? So we can satisfy the critical
I was
area?
thinking that a compromise might be to get a landscape architect, or we stay this, to have a landscape architect tell us that what Mr. Dolgus is telling us is either absolutely correct or wrong. Because how do we know at this point?
I will say, I was,
I know, you've told me no so many times in the past when you were with the Corps.
but however, as part of the court and the history and my history there, a lot of things were done that shouldn't have been done and had to be undone. And I've had to design, I don't know how many projects like this to put them back so they would work. So I've got quite a bit of design experience with this, and I feel like this is just not a good site. I would never recommend it there for a marsh.
You're calling it a marsh, and is a marsh the same thing as a living shoreline? I don't think so. Because a marsh, to me, is regularly inundated by the tide. And is
Well,
this
so is a
supposed to be
marsh.
regularly inundated by the tide?
So is a marsh.
It is? Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Well,
Again, we're talking a little bit longer than that table. That's it. We're not talking about a big expansive project that's, the public's gonna look at and
this
say,
table
boy,
is not anywhere near 45 feet.
how did they do that? But I bet from that wall to that wall's close. So we're, it's not a project that the public's gonna look and say, wow, how did they ever get a permit to do that?
You never know.
We're talking a small,
It doesn't matter whether it's
But-
small or big, it's whether it can be approved under the terms and requirements of the code. So, it seems to be, development on slopes greater than 15% shall be prohibited unless the project is the only effective way to maintain or improve the stability of the land. I don't think there's any question that that portion of Mr., is it Watson?
Yes.
Watson's property is not stable, obviously, because we can see from the photographs that the bank is seriously eroding. So it's not stable. Do you have enough information to conclude that what he wants to do, which is put stone in there, is the only effective way to improve stability?
So that's the question,
Yep.
is it the only effective way? And
Have they proven that it is, such that you can, in your capacity as the planning director, the super planning director, say, we think that the permit should be issued by the county, or will be issued by the county for the 45 feet of stone revetment?
Are there any statistics on living shorelines?
I don't know.
what was the question? I
Are
couldn't,
there any statistics on living shorelines?
is it what?
Are there any statistics on living shorelines? In other words, how many survive compared to how many fail? And I can even speak to that's something that nobody with the state wants to track. Anne Arundel County, so here, most of the work I do is public work, especially when it comes to shoreline work. So I don't go through the permit process that often because it is a headache. 9 times out of 10, it's a headache involved to get a, personal homeowner approved for a structural shoreline, even though I think they need it. Well, Anne Arundel County bids a lot of these that are living shorelines, and I want to say at least it seems like 2 out of every 3 fail, and then 3 or 4 years later, they'll dump more money to redoing it, and then it may fail again, and they'll dump more money. And for Anne Arundel County, that's one thing. For a private homeowner, it's another. They're not getting funds because here again, those projects were all approved too, and some architect, landscape engineer designed them saying they would work, and they failed. Now, if Anne Arundel County, who's paying a consulting firm to design these, a lot of money, has so many projects fail, I don't understand how it's fair in this case to ask this homeowner and us to come up with a landscape architect that's going to design something that'll succeed living shoreline based. I just don't see it.
Do they require maintenance after they're installed, or you just let them go?
Well, if they're successful, they should take off, grow, and not be a problem. If it's at the right elevation, the right grade, and it maintains that. However, if a storm washes part of it out, which what I'm concerned is sediment's going to disappear, then you'd have to try to do it over again. My experience with these things, which is a lot of years, I've seen not very many that have been successful. And and the ones that have been successful, it's in a better environment, a better situation. You don't have northwest winds smacking you. You don't have shade problems. I mean, it's wide open shoreline, up in some back creek somewhere that you don't get a lot of energy. Something like this that has two strikes against it to start with, it's not going to work.
Does anybody inspect the living shorelines after they're planted? Does the state send somebody out, or the county, or?
On inspection. What was the question?
Are the living shorelines, are they inspected once they're installed? Does the state or the county, do they send inspectors out to check them?
We would do it upon completion of the project. But no, there isn't a maintenance inspection.
No.
But there is an inspection to make sure it was installed per
Oh.
plans.
But not after that, you just make sure it's there.
So if,
And that's typical with the state, MDE and the like. They just don't have the people to follow up.
so if they back out 40 or 50 feet out into the water to create that slope you're talking about,
Right.
and it'll be 40 feet wide, how is that going to affect the dock? And when you're talking about all of this energy that's going to be pushing against all this, how is that going to affect the depth at the dock? How is it going to affect SUVs that are in the area when there's a severe storm and all of this
It's,
gets
One-
traumatized?
it's a given, that material, loose material, when you got that kind of energy, like I was saying, bouncing off that stone one, it's going to wind up under the pier. He's going to lose his depth, and he's going to want to dredge the slip. More impacts. As far as SAVs, it's a very good point. I mentioned that a little bit later. It makes no sense ecologically to fill shallow water habitat with SAVs especially to create a marsh.
Well, and more so if there's a high likelihood of failure. Because any chance of failure, that sand that you filled with is all it's all going somewhere else.
And there are SUVs there now?
I don't know.
I can't speak to that at all.
You can see what,
In the
it
creek,
looks like there's some of this
yes, but
marsh grass is actually going up in the, yeah.
SAVs are
That's not an SAV. That's not an SAV.
submerged aquatic
Yeah.
vegetation, in case you weren't familiar.
Ms. Horsey, do you have any additional questions?
No questions.
Mr. Mackey? I mean, Mr. Massey?
I got a little bit there.
Thanks, John.
Let me make somebody totally lose the top of their head. If you ran the riprap, the stone, in the water down to 40 feet, somebody's gonna go crazy, right? That would never be able.
you never, I mean, you're not going more than 10-foot channel where the mean high tide typically is a general permit. That's your limit. In areas that you can permit a stone revetment, you're not going more than 10 feet channelward, typically. There are exceptions.
The part that MDE approved allowed it to go out because of the root ball of that big tree.
Root ball.
To-
That's what I'm saying, you couldn't continue that on down the shoreline.
You could, I mean, it could easily be done, however,
Yeah.
somebody would have to authorize it.
Right, and that would never be. From your experience, you wouldn't get that authorized.
No, based upon the noise level of trying to do that, we backed off and just said, well, how about if we just put it up in the yard and get out of the water and get out of the controversy? And that was the whole goal of which I thought would be very simple.
Note that MDE will only permits the stone because there's an existing pier and a specimen tree. If those two things weren't there, they'd be insisting on a living shoreline for the whole 85 feet.
Yeah, but as he just said, he wants to put it up in the yard. He just said up in the yard.
Up in the yard is meaning, so long as it's above mean.
Above mean high,
Above mean high water. It's not really in the yard.
but it's out of MDE jurisdiction.
It really is, though. I mean,
No, it's not. It's at the bottom of the bank.
if you slope that sheer bluff there,
It's going
from
up in
the
the
toe
yard.
of it back into the yard, it's mowed lawn right to the edge of it.
That's maybe what the owner really wants. He wants to be able to walk down to the water and not have to jump off into the,
Well,
jump off the bank.
What it really started this process is he's about to lose his pier. And that's what started his urgency. I don't have a picture of it, but his pier has an added board already because there's about to be a gap before, he's losing land. And I mean, I can't speak to if it's a foot a year or exactly what it is, but there's no doubt, as you can see in the pictures, it doesn't show unless you're there in person, but you can tell on site that he's lost land from June of this year until today, which were the other photos you see with the snow cover. It's evident, and here again, just trying to help this man get his shoreline stabilized so he can actually enjoy it and not have to worry about continually to lose property in the future. If I may,
There is, maybe, Alex, maybe this is more with bulkheads than stone. But oftentimes, you would see with bulkheads where they came to an end, the land immediately adjacent to the end of the bulkhead would get scoured out. Is that a problem with stone as well, such that,
no, because you typically will
you
tow
know what
it,
I'm saying, at the end of bulkheads, how sometimes it gets scoured out?
typically will tow it back into the bank. In other words, dig a trench on either end of it, back in, put stone back in there, so it can't erode back in.
Okay.
the other thing to mention that is important, and Alex spoke to it earlier, is whenever you put a bulkhead, all that wave energy is deflected. When by putting riprap, a lot of it is dissipated in the rock. And that's why originally rock was that was why bulkheads were pretty much outlawed, and they wanted riprap because you want to dissipate that energy. You don't want that energy just ricocheting everywhere else.
It scours, when you hit a bulkhead, it just scours out the shallow water.
That makes sense.
What I was going to add, if it's all right, is, now, I don't have the permit for it, but supposedly 3 houses down, a living shoreline was approved about 15 years ago, and it took it less than a year to fail. So on the same creek, within 500 feet of this property, a living shoreline has already failed.
And there's plenty of examples around where they've failed a bit. Right up the river, there's some properties.
Finish. You have any questions?
No.
You have any final comments?
No, I think I've said all I need to say.
Mr. Mackey, you want to
County.
make a final statement?
I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to come before you.
Well, you certainly haven't made it easy, that's for sure.
Well, that's what I get paid for. Just like this guy over here. All right.
It seems that, to me, it seems as though the ordinance is clear that, what is that last statement that you said, the only option? or-
Okay, development on slopes greater than 15% as measured before development shall be prohibited unless the project is the only effective way to maintain or improve the stability of the land.
Okay. So according to the county and the ordinance, and Critical Area Commission and the Maryland Department of Environment, a living shoreline is an alternative. Mr. Douglas and Mr. Lindstrom are proposing that it's not the only alternative, and it is ineffective, and it's likely to be ineffective as compared to stone revetment or riprap. And Mr. Douglas has provided, with his 50 years of experience working for the Corps of Engineers in dealing with these issues, has brought up points that nobody else seems to be, including Critical Area and Department of Environment, have been able to comment on, don't seem to understand or attribute any significance to, I guess. I don't.
Or we might say not rebutted by anybody, really. Not
Pardon?
rebutted by MDE or
I'm sorry, what did you say?
not rebutted by,
Yeah,
or not contradicted by MDE or critical area.
yeah, good point. So it creates a dilemma for us in that we're not bound, but we generally abide by the ordinance and Critical Area Commission and Department of the Environment. And that's what makes it difficult for us to decide in your favor. Despite the fact that there's a potential for it to fail, the living shoreline.
I can comment.
Well, we're done with comments. We're deliberating now.
All right.
So it's what makes it really, really difficult. I think you've presented a convincing argument with regard to stone revetment, but I'm still not sure that's the only option, and that the living shoreline is also an option if it's done properly. I guess my biggest concern is going out 40 or 50 feet into the water and backfilling all of that, and its potential effect on the rest of the shoreline there. And we've always been critical of anything that has to do with potential danger to SUVs, and certainly we wouldn't want to create a difficulty for the landowner with regard to sediment control around that dock and his pier and his ability to use that dock with his boat and all that. So it's of significance and concern. Mr. Mackey, or Mr. Massey, do you have?
We know what Mackey thinks. He's already
Yeah.
put it-
Well, in a little over 8 years, I've read many letters from the Critical Area Commission. And their answer is usually, in the letter, basically one of two. They either, they don't disagree or they don't agree. They never come out and say they totally agree with something or they are totally against something. But in this letter of January 17th, they got wordy. They've laid out where they don't agree with the riprap. So, they're supposed to be the experts, although we have a local expert here who disagrees with theirs. But they came on the meeting in February. It was walked away with MDE and critical areas that the 45 feet is suitable for a living shoreline. So it does make it a hard decision, but you've got to listen to the state experts also.
So you have to listen to them? Well, my comment would be, I think Mr. Wackey has done his due diligence, but I also think that Mr. Dolgus and Mr. Lindstrom have both made some really good points. And they've been actually out in the field working with these things, and I don't know how many of these critical area people and MDE people have actually been in the field. So, it's just a hard decision.
It's I don't know if I can talk or not. It's an unfortunate situation right now, in the last few years especially. The people that are supposedly evaluating these things, most of them have about 1.5 years experience. That took a state job, most of them from some other office type position, got hired doing this. Unfortunately, because I deal with the people quite often, there's no experience out there. And some of the things that
Nick
they've
Kelly's been
come,
around for quite a while.
some of the things they've come up with,
Nick Kelly's been around for a while. I think he wrote that letter. That's not to say that he's ever built a living shoreline, but he's worked for a critical area for quite a while.
So if we agree with Mr. Mackey, Mr. Dolgus has the right to appeal to
Circuit Court.
If we agree with Mr. Dolgus, Critical Area Commission, MDE,
No,
and
not MDE, Critical Area Commission.
Critical Area Commission,
Or the county.
the county has the right to appeal to the court.
Yep.
Are we setting a precedent in any way if we,
No, this is very fact-specific. Mr. Dolgus has explained very particular facts that he believes justify the use of the stone rather than the recommended living shoreline, which is the fetch, the lack of sun. If I was going, it seems to me the fetch is more important than the sun. And it is northwest, and that's where the wind would come from in a storm, probably. In a winter storm.
Anybody want to make a motion?
you're up. You're up.
No, I think you're up.
You're up.
I think it's going to be, it may be 2-1, so.
That's when I made the motion, sir.
Okay. No.
You want me to make a motion?
Well, I guess I make a motion, we confirm the decision of the Kent County Planning Commission Director regarding the sediment erosion control application
I'll second that.
for, I can keep on going, 12594 Cooper's Lane, Morton.
You said affirm, did you say?
Affirm, yes. Confirm.
Okay.
Well, I would reluctantly agree with that. I think Mr. Douglas has really given us a good argument with that. And, but I think we really have to go with the government with regard to this.
So I will second that motion.
All in favor?
I don't like it.
I'll vote no.
I'm having a little trouble, sorry.
It's a 2-1 decision in favor of Mr. Mackey.
Okay. So, I will,
Is there an opportunity for public comment here?
oh. I didn't, sorry, we didn't know somebody, who is on the, who is that?
This is Greg Watson, the property owner.
Oh, we didn't know he was on the,
We didn't know he was here.
oh, okay.
It's a little late for comment now. I would think.
Yeah.
Well, it was never opened up for comment. That's why I'm asking.
Well, we did
When
ask
was
whether
that
there was,
opportunity?
we did ask whether there was anything further from the applicant, and I'm afraid your representatives didn't know you were on the line. Well, could you give us a 2-minute, your 3-minute set of comments so they're part of the record?
Yeah, I just wanted to just weigh in on, I've been trying to get this done for about 8 years. I've been losing about a foot a year of property. I'm about to lose the pier. I'm about to lose the large tree. I've talked to several different people about how to do this. And this is where we've settled with Mr. Lindstrom, is that the best opportunity to save those things is with his solution. What you're asking me to do is now go back and try to get someone to believe that a living shoreline will work. When you have an expert in front of you that has testified that it will likely not work. And in addition to a living shoreline, even the people sitting, I don't know who was talking, but if the living shoreline fails, then my dock also fails because the living shoreline would erode to the point where it creates more sediment underneath my dock. So then I have no use of the dock, either through the end of the pier or by heading to the dock because I've lost more shoreline. So I just wanted to just, I don't understand why we can't believe the expert in the room. We have to believe the experts who are not in the room, who probably have not seen and come out and really looked into the shoreline and any possible correction of trying to just do something simple that I want to do, and that's save the tree and save the dock.
Okay.
That's all I
Well,
need.
thank you, Mr. Watson. I think you're going to save the tree and the pier with the stone, and that's why the MDE has allowed you to build the stone revetment to save those two items. Whether living shoreline will adversely impact the water depth, I don't know, sir. Seems to me if the fetch is as described by Mr. Dolgus, the sediment's going to move away from the pier rather than towards it, but I don't know. Okay, well, thank you very much, sir.
Okay. Sorry for the decision. It certainly wasn't an easy one for us, that's for sure. And you gave an excellent presentation
Thank you.
with that.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah. I'm a little concerned about the precedent that sets.
Well, I'm hoping that you can design, they can design a living shoreline that has some a good chance of survival, and that are some clauses written in the contract that will assure that adequate maintenance and exemplary effort to make it work are there, that's for sure. I think that's going to be a critical factor based on Mr. Dolgus's testimony. So hopefully the landowner will take his information and use it to ensure the best success for the project. Thank you.
Okay. Do you need, is there anything else?
Yeah, we have one more.
Minutes, yeah. Make a motion, we approve the minutes.
Have everybody read the minutes from the previous meeting? Make a motion.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of October 16th, 2023.
Second the motion.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, minutes from the previous meeting have been approved.
Well, part of the problem is,
Is somebody going to make a motion to
Motion to adjourn?
do we have anything for next time?
All in favor?
Aye.